All right. Hello. Welcome to This Week in History with Mike and Will. I'm Mike.
I'm Will.
And this is what we do. We pick a day in history, and then Will tells me about it. He's got 1 hour to do it. If you enjoy the show, like and subscribe. Obviously, we just got a new subscriber.
We did get a new subscriber. That was exciting. We got really excited.
We were very excited.
As somebody we didn't know already.
Don't know.
Doubly cool.
Don't know their name.
No idea.
But they did make a comment, though, that the Mehmed died in the same place that Hannibal died.
And then he said that our comparison between Mehmed and the Roman Empire was pretty accurate because he was Romanizing things.
There you go.
Then he pointed out how the Janissaries were like the Roman Praetorian Guard. That was pretty cool. It's a good assessment.
Thanks, new person.
We love getting information and feedback from people. We like having this be a conversational thing. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
And if we get stuff wrong, tell us.
So, today we've moved on. We're moving ahead in history.
Moving slightly.
A little ahead.
Ahead.
He has 1 hour to explain to me what happened in 1587, February 8th, the death of Queen Mary. Queen. Do it again. 1587, February 8th, the death of Mary, Queen of Scots.
Mary, Queen of Scots. That's right.
We
needed. Did you just pinch your finger?
I did.
That's a lethal thing. All right. So first thing we have to talk about with Mary, Queen of Scots is she is a contemporary of another very famous Mary, Bloody Mary, who was the Queen of England.
Yes. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago.
Not the same person.
Different person.
Really, totally different person.
Same.
Still descended from same background, same family.
Yeah.
They had the same grandfather.
Henry.
This seventh.
Not Henry VIII.
Maybe eighth.
Was he the one that killed everybody? That's
Henry VIII killed everybody. So the way this line works is Mary.
Henry.
That's right.
Mary. That's all I do.
Mary's father, Mary Queen of Scots' father, is James V, King of Scotland. And his mom was Margaret Tudor, who's Henry VIII's sister. So technically, Mary Queen of Scots, it would be her, let's see, that's her dad, that's her grandma, so it would be her grand uncle is Henry VIII, and her great-grandfather was Henry VIII's dad. So that makes her contemporary queen at the time, Elizabeth. They are cousins, but once removed. She'd be kind of her great cousin, sort of. It's her great uncle's daughter, so it makes it complicated.
Okay.
It's not her uncle's daughter makes her a cousin. It's her great uncle's daughter. That's the math. Is once removed. So totally
different.
Hold on.
Keep talking. No, don't keep talking. There's something rattling that's driving me nuts. Every time you hand gesture, it rattles.
Oh, and we gesture. That's better. We had our little table thing screwed up.
We're good now.
So, Mary, Queen of Scots, very different than the Bloody Mary of England.
Yes.
There are similarities, and this is where it gets confusing. They both had problems with Elizabeth I.
Okay.
Whereas Mary, Queen of Scots was her cousin, and then Bloody Mary was her half-sister.
Okay.
Both Marys are devout Catholics during a time where there's a huge shift in Protestantism, and both were part of a level of violence within their country and some plotting. With Bloody Mary, she was in full control of England for 5 years, and she killed hundreds of Protestants because she didn't like Protestantism and she was a devout Catholic. Because nothing says you love Jesus like murdering folk,
right?
Who think differently. And then Mary Queen of Scots, though, didn't do that. She did not murder Protestants.
Well, that's one way you can tell them apart.
That's a very... I mean, she Protestants died under her reign, but that was war, as opposed to, I hate you because you're different than me.
All right. Fair enough.
So we're going to learn a little bit about... We're not going to do a direct comparison, but I just want to make sure everybody understands. There's two very different people.
But around the same time, I'm obviously confused.
But around the same time, and they get confused all the time because it's the same. It's the same island. It's Scotland in the north, and England's right here, and one ruled the other, but never at the same time.
Got it.
So, Mary, I don't think even knew I don't think they even knew each other.
Oh,
I think Bloody Mary was dead before Mary Queen of Scots.
well, that's embarrassing for us who confused them now.
Yeah, right. But they are contemporaries in that it's the same century, same chunk of land, same relatives, same royal family, and Henry VIII was a bastard to both of them. Like, he's just the worst. And we're going to get into how he was a bastard to Mary Queen of Scots. So from now on, when I talk about Mary, I just mean Mary Queen of Scots.
Yes.
Not Bloody Mary from England. And people, I don't care if they're offended by me calling her Bloody Mary. She earned the title.
She was queen, though. Was she Queen Mary?
She was queen.
Queen
Yep,
Mary.
Queen Mary the First of England.
First.
I think they just call her Queen Mary of England because there hasn't been another.
Right. That's presumptuous.
Yeah.
The first. What are you
For
planning?
the first, is there a second? Are you saying there would be a second? No. Just you. You're the only
Queen
one.
Mary the only. How about the last?
Yeah, she's rolling in her grave. Can I please just be Mary instead of Bloody Mary? No. You killed too many people. Interestingly enough, though, she's referred to Bloody Mary. She killed a lot less people than Henry VIII.
Well, Bloody Henry.
Bloody Henry. See, that's kind of what do we always talk about?
Bloody Henry.
The patriarchy.
Yeah, is that?
Woman kills like 250 Protestants. Bloody Mary. Man kills hundreds of Catholics. Just dude.
Yeah.
Just dude.
I think it might be you don't expect a woman to kill anyone.
They tend to be nicer throughout history. They
Yeah.
tend to be nicer. So when one does something that violent, you're like, oh.
Jeez.
Look at like Elizabeth though. She fought wars. Her reign, a lot more people died. Not bloody Elizabeth. I think it was the focus point.
Personal part of it.
Like, really hate Protestants. And it was in a relatively short reign of only 5 years, and it was like super persecution and kind of a reverse. But
Also, ultimately, you usually don't get to pick your
sobriquet?
your marketing.
Yeah.
Your what?
sobriquet, I think, is what that's called. Is like Bloody Mary, Mehmed the Conqueror.
Sobriquet?
Sobriquet. I think it's actually pronounced sobriquet because it's French. It's Sobriquet. I think it's sobriquet.
I'll look it up.
That's one of those. Again, I learned it by reading it, not by saying it. So
I
believe that's
never really thought there'd be a word for that thing, but I
Of
know
course,
it's a
the
thing.
French would have that. This is the word that means we have a word to describe you. Isn't that an adjective? No. No, it is not. It's very different. So anyway, and the French come into this story.
Oh, okay, good. Some
Also,
French accents.
awesome story. Nothing bad happens to the Jews during this. Huzzah! It's 2 weeks in a row.
Wow.
It's 2 weeks in a row.
Good job.
I'm going to keep this going. I hope.
Let's do our little bit
We'll
to
see.
keep
We'll
the
do our-
Jews of history safe.
Safe. Like, I mean, as best as we can. We can only
By-
report on what happened.
I guess we can't save
We can't save what's happened.
retroactively.
But we can talk about the horrible things that were done and explain why that's not okay.
Yes, it's okay.
All right, so now we know the difference between Mary, Queen of Scots, or Mary for the extent of our tale, and Mary the First, Queen of England, also known as Bloody Mary. Totally different people.
Different people.
So Mary, her father's James V, and James had like a couple of heirs, and they all died.
Ooh.
And then he died when Mary was 6 days old.
Ooh.
And she assumed the throne. So,
Wow.
baby. We've talked about young kings and queens.
That's a young one. 6
That's
days.
6 days old.
That's young.
Usually you don't see like the end of one reign and the start of a new one, and the starting of the reign beginning with like the same year as their birth. I had to like double check the dates. I was like, huh? So, there's 6 days of difference. She's a baby.
She was born queen,
She's
basically.
born. Yep. It's like he maybe got to hold her once and then he died. He might not have even gotten to hold her if he wasn't in the castle at the time. He should have gotten back and he died. So James V dies. And Mary of, I think it's pronounced Guise. It's spelled like Guise. Guise. It's French. She was a French woman. She was James's wife, queen consort. And she basically takes over the regency and kind of runs things for the baby.
Okay. Because it would be ludicrous to have a 6-year-old.
You can't have a 6-day-old going.
6-day-old.
Oh my God. They can't. They're smaller than the scepter. They can't.
Yeah.
They can't. They're basically just gurgling and smiling and kind of pooping themselves.
Yeah.
It's a helpless little nothing.
You're
right?
familiar with babies, right?
I've seen babies. Everyone knows what babies are, right? Like you've seen it. Like human babies, they're kind of can't do anything.
Don't put them in charge of.
Don't put them in charge of anything. They can't see past this far. Ah, yes, my subjects. Those are your toes. Okay, that's about it. Mary's mother, Mary, they're so original with names.
What should we call this one? Mary.
Mary. Mary's mother kind of runs things, and there's another regent along the line that kind of helped guide things. But when Mary...
This is Scotland they're running.
It's Scotland.
Right.
Scotland. Now, this is in 1542 is when she's born.
Okay.
And kind of takes over the throne 8 days later. In 1548, she's sent to France because things with England aren't going well. Henry VIII is... Oh, actually, yeah. So actually, since Henry VIII is king right now, so actually, I lied when I said Mary and Mary never would have known each other.
Oh.
They never would have known each other probably because they were ruling at different... they were in different places.
Yeah.
But Henry VIII is king right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because he engages in what they call the rough wooing of Scotland.
Go on. I'm intrigued.
It's about as nice and kind as you can imagine. Henry's idea of wooing being, any woman who doesn't do what he wants either gets decapitated or sent away or treated like garbage. That's basically how he treats Scotland. He wants his son Edward, who's a child, to be betrothed to Mary, who's technically like his grandniece. So this is icky.
But also a child.
But also a very baby.
He's planning ahead.
He's planning ahead.
For whatever reason he
And
had.
the rough wooing starts in
wooing.
1543. So right after. She's like a year old.
Okay.
So he's planning a dynasty. He wants to unite Scotland and England under him, basically. He wants to do this. And Henry's had these aspirations of conquest and uniting things. He tried to reconquer France, because England held France 500 years before. And he thinks he's this empire builder. But everything is kind of coming up. Not great for him. So
Maybe
he decides,
if he wasn't such a jerk.
Maybe if he wasn't such a jerk. So he also goes, well, Scotland is super Catholic. And I'm newfound Protestant. I just created my own church. Down with Scotland. So he's sending armies up north to beat up the Scots. Now, this has been a thing.
Well, that's easy. If you want to beat up somebody, I've decided we're a new religion, and that religion hates you.
Yep.
So we got to go to war.
And England doesn't really need much of a pretext to invade Scotland. They've always done it. England and Scotland have been fighting for 1,000 years at this point. They just kind of don't like each other.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to when it was the Picts and the Bretons just beating each other up. They just did not like each other.
So like the Hatfields and McCoys.
Exactly. But way worse.
Okay. Countries.
Way worse.
Yeah.
Country levels, right? And for hundreds of years. So he's sending armies up to try to convince Scotland, basically, hey, you can either get beat up or you can marry your princess to my prince.
Here's my weird offer to you.
It's a very weird... It's definitely...
You know that baby you have?
There is no carrot and stick. It's just a cudgel. He's just using the carrot as a stick at the same time. He's just hitting them. So the Scots are well, this is no good. We've got to get...
This is not good.
This is not great. We need to get...
Great.
We need to send the baby away. Send her to France. Because they have what's called the Old Alliance. The Old Alliance is between Scotland and France. It was in 1295.
Yes.
And they decided, we're buddies because England sucks.
We hated them.
That was their unit. The England sucks. That was their...
So, to get to France from Scotland, you just probably go in the
just
ocean,
sail.
right?
You don't march
don't
south
go through.
and go. You just get on a boat and
So
sail
they
down
pack the
coast.
baby up,
Yep, pack the baby up, send her to France.
poke some air holes in there.
To further, basically, give Henry the finger, they have her be betrothed to the Dauphin of France, the prince.
How old is he at the time?
He's a kid too.
Okay.
He's a kid. He's not yet into
So,
his...
France, they get delivered. Here's, sir, we got a
here's
package.
a baby.
It's a baby.
Wah!
It's your future queen. All right.
All right, who's she marrying? Your son. And he's picking his nose and poking a stick in the ground because he's 4, right? He's a kid too.
Go put them in separate corners till they...
Till they can both communicate and make them be friends, and then they're going to be married and have children. Which is still less weird than Henry trying to marry his son to his grandniece.
So was Mary then raised French?
She was raised speaking fluent French, also knowing she's the Queen of Scotland. Nice. She had tutors from both, but not tutors.
Yes.
Because there's a Tudor family.
Yeah, I was going to mention them.
And then she has tutors who are educators. So she's brought up to understand the French court, how they run things. France is very Catholic. Because at the time, they have some Protestants, say the Huguenots, who are kind of like chill Catholics at the time. They're a fairly relaxed group. And France has had its own issues with religion, different groups of divisions within their church.
Sure.
Right? So she's kind of understanding like some of this. She's learning how the French rule, and she's very much taught, when you grow up, queen, you the boss.
You the boss.
In Scotland, there's just fighting going on with Henry because Henry sucks.
Yes.
And that goes on from 1543 to 1551. So
James's former wife, the Queen Consort, she's
kind of running things,
okay.
yeah. There was another regent his name was also James. It's really good. I think
you're taking notes, just write the word James.
James.
And
Just
marry a
like
bunch.
the nice thing about Scotland is when a guy's doing it, you can just assume it's a James.
Okay.
And if a woman's doing it, it's probably Mary.
Okay.
You just have to keep track of the last names.
Yeah,
So yeah, one of her regents before she was queen was, I believe, James Hamilton. So he's running some things, and after the Queen Mother, I think the Queen Mother passed, but I'm not positive.
Okay.
But she seemed to like she was liked by her people. It wasn't like the people were like, get rid of her.
Right.
We don't like her. Kill her. So eventually, though, this kind of war is going on with Henry, and then it ends. Mary eventually comes back to Scotland. But before that, in 1558, she gets married to the Dauphin of France.
As planned.
His name is Francis.
Francis the Dauphin de France.
Francis the Dauphin de France. And 2 years later, he becomes King of France.
Hey!
Hooray!
Does he change his name?
No, he's Francis because he lasts about 4 seconds. Because in 1560, he dies of illness.
Oh.
So Mary's like, well, I'm going home because
my husband
died, and it's not like I have any authority.
I got to be Queen of France for an hour.
For like an hour. It's not long at all. It's a very short period of time.
So she doesn't get to stay on, though?
No, she
nobody.
has no real power there anymore.
okay.
And they want to marry off the next French king to somebody else, not her. Probably-
Sorry, we raised your entire life for this situation.
Go home.
Bye.
You're an adult now anyway. So 1548, she's 16 years old. And she sails back to Scotland, which is now having its own Protestant Reformation. So she comes back at this weird time where she is raised a devout Catholic, and Scotland is not.
Things
It's
have
kind of
changed.
split, right?
Can't go home again.
Exactly. Yep. That's a. You can't go home. You really can't. I mean, you can, because she does.
It's never quite the same.
But it's different. It's always
Suddenly
different.
everyone's Protestant.
Yeah, suddenly everybody's Protestant. So she gets back, and things are very different. And everybody's kind of watching to see what she's going to do. So the famous preacher John Knox, who we talked about in a previous episode, who spoke at James Stewart's funeral.
Yes.
And was very much against, like, there is no divine will that makes you king or queen. He basically says, why should we listen to you, Queenie? I didn't vote for you. You didn't vote for king. How'd you become king? It's that whole Monty Python peasants spiel, right?
Yeah.
So everybody's waiting because if she's like a bad queen or a bad fit, the Protestants will just boot her. Like they're.
Does she know that?
She kind of gets that.
Yeah.
So she immediately sets about letting people know that she is going to be tolerant towards religion.
Okay.
Her first years of rule are marked by tolerance, moderation, and being pragmatic about how she handles things. She's like, well, yeah, I'm Catholic, but I'm not going to force Catholicism on my people because that doesn't really go well with what's going on in England.
Yeah.
So let's just chill. She also has a really, really good advisor. Her half-brother, James Stewart, who she eventually makes first Earl of Moray, and then way down the line, we talked about first man assassinated with firearms. Unfortunate.
Check out our previous episode.
If you
about
want
the
to know about that.
first person assassinated by a firearm.
The death of James.
Oh, it's called The Death of James Stewart. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's a spoiler for it.
Spoilers.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, spoiler.
If
He
you
doesn't make it.
If you haven't watched that episode before.
I mean, spoiler. None of these people are alive anymore. Like, none of them survive. This is history.
The biggest killer of them all.
Biggest killer.
Time.
And plague.
Second.
Plague's
Right.
pretty big. So, but really, if you live long enough, the plague gets you.
I guess.
So, anyway, Mary returns and she's single.
Ready to mingle.
Single, ready to mingle.
Ready to mingle.
Ready to mingle.
Oh, she has a French accent now, though, too.
Ready to mingle, but also Scottish, so she's ready to mingle. I can't do it. I can't do it.
That exists.
She like immediately gets there and they're all like, "Who's this lady?" And she's like, "Wee," and they're like, "No, you not in here. You won't. You do that outside like the rest of us." No, it means yes. I don't care what it means. Go outside. So
I enjoyed that little play. That was nice.
That was nice. So she decides she's got to get married at some point.
Gotta fit in.
While she's kind of managing things. Again, she's got good advisors, specifically her half-brother. She makes him an earl of a new territory because he does such a good job of it. And she marries this
James Earl Joe.
James Stewart.
James
Stewart.
Earl James.
James Stewart, who we decided that's Scotland's Jimmy Stewart is Sean Connery.
Yes.
So he's James Stewart.
James Stewart.
James Stewart.
Earl.
The Earl of Moray and Mar. New lands, to be sure. I mean, they were somebody else's lands. We just took them away. Now I'm the boss.
We're gonna have to subtitle this episode.
I have no idea what's going on anymore. So anyway, moving forward.
Yes.
She decides to get hitched. She marries her half-cousin.
Why not? Stay close.
Because the family line in England and Scotland, it's just, the tree is just a straight line.
Yeah.
Like, it's straight as a pole. Like, as much as you can. I mean, they got cousins marrying cousins and half-siblings.
Now, part of getting married in this time as well is maintaining wealth, too. Or like land and stuff like that. So yes, at some point, the pool is going to
dry out.
be the...
I mean, you
Find me a rich person. Well, all the rich people are related to
We're
you.
all married. I guess I'll marry my cousin then. He's got the nice land. Also, war though disrupts a lot of that. You know, you got changing borders and boundaries and all this stuff, so you can divvy it up. A common thing is to take like royal lands, because usually the kings of the land own the most land, and they divvy it up and they can give it to other people to make new lords. And then those guys are like loyal to you, so you, especially like in parliamentary days, you can really pack Parliament full of loyalists by going, "You're the new Lord of Thornbury, and you're the new Lord of Berrythorn, and you're the new Lord of Frankenfurter, and you're..." And they're like, "Where is this?" It's like, "Oh, it's 6 acres of land over there. It was all one big chunk of land, but I just divvy it up into 3 pieces, and you guys can all have some." Well, that's not much of a lordship. No, but you also get a fancy office and a chain of gold that says you're a noble.
And everyone knows that you are.
You're fancy pants,
Look
so
how
you got a
fancy you
fixed
are.
income. You don't have to work.
Walking around with your fancy pants on.
Yep. You get tenant farmers who give you food. It's nice.
Where do you get your fancy pants from?
France.
Yeah.
France has the fancy pants. Fancy pants France, that's what they call it. Fancy pants was originally just fancy
pants. Put on some fancy pants.
Put on some fancy pants. Get out of here. So Mary marries her half-cousin, whose last name is also Stewart. Her last name is Stewart, but it's spelled different. It's U-A-R-T. Because they're cousins. It's slightly different, right?
It's just different enough.
So she marries Henry Stewart, the Lord of Darnley, in 1565. They have a kid, James.
James, why not?
Why
Look up
not?
in our book of names. Book of names is 1 page. James.
James. Large print, double spaced. We've got 6 names to pick from. James will eventually become James the 6th.
Okay.
And the 1st.
Oh.
He's a very important person. We'll explain all
The
that.
6th and the 1st.
That is directly related to our tale.
We'll keep going.
Because, moving down the line, now she's married to this guy, but there are stories that maybe it wasn't the happiest marriage. And in 1567, in February, so a whopping 2 years after they're married, the house blows up.
Blows up.
Like the Scots, again, they don't do anything by half measures. I mean, James Stewart blew up a house once because he didn't like the people. Then you have the gunpowder plot a few years later. Like, Britain's all about blowing up houses, apparently. That's just how they solve problems. Like,
This makes a statement.
Here's some kegs of gunpowder, let's blow this house up. And Darnley, the husband, Henry Darnley, a lord of Darnley, they typically just go by the lord of whatever they're the lord of, which gets confusing because if there's 16 lords of Norfolk in a row,
right?
You're just like, Lord Norfolk, which one? Because one of them was 57 and then died, one was 18 and then died, one ruled for 100 years. You know, it gets confusing. King Henry VIII, Lord of Norfolk, is different than James is Lord of Norfolk. But they typically just kind of say, oh, this. So Darnley is what he's called. Darnley. His house blows up, and they find him murdered in the garden. So they blew up his house, and then they killed him. It's like a double, why blow up the house? I thought they'd just blow him up in the house, but maybe they missed.
Yeah.
They're hoping to blow up his house.
He was out gardening.
Yeah, we got him. Oh, wait. Is that it? Did we blow up the house for no... That took a lot of work.
Did they blow up his house in front of him?
Yeah. Ooh. We show you. Stab.
And they stabbed him?
Oh, stab.
Okay.
Yes. He was murdered. So that was the description they get, is he's murdered. So more than likely stabbed, possibly strangled to death, beaten to death. Was not shot.
But was not killed by the blowing up thing.
Was not killed by the blowing up thing. He was found murdered in his garden. Possibly trying to flee.
I was thinking shrapnel or something.
I thought so too. I thought he's in the house.
Yeah.
Nope. He's in his garden. So that's probably what happened, is they were going to blow him up in the house.
Whoops.
Weird accident. It was a gas line. We don't have those in Scotland yet. It's 1567. It's never been invented.
I think we're going to have those for a while.
We're not going to have that for a while. The worst gas is when we eat too much haggis and drink too much beer, and we can't hang out with Angus because he just farts everywhere. That's gas.
Kaboom.
It's not going to blow up a house. You'll not want to stay in the house.
Wait, so where's Mary at the time?
Not there. Dun, dun, dun. So it's largely assumed that this fellow, let me get his name right, James Hepburn, not related to Audrey,
I wasn't
or Captain,
okay.
Lord of Bothwell, is the suspect. He's the prime suspect. Now this guy,
Lord of Bothwell.
I started doing some research on him, and he's a bit of a bastard. When he was younger, he was engaged to be married to this beautiful Norwegian woman. He was given a massive dowry. Her dad is this admiral who's so popular and famous and well respected that he's not the Norwegian admiral. He's sitting in the Danish king's court. So he's a big mover and shaker. He's a very powerful lord. And she's a very wealthy noble and heiress, right? Well, he takes the dowry and runs. Doesn't marry her. Marries some other lady in England. Yoink. Yoink. Thank you very much. Goes back to Scotland and starts moving his way up the power structure, right? And he's not very well respected because of the leaving this lady at the altar, marrying this other lady, etc. And it seems to be, and he starts kind of insinuating himself into Mary's court. He gets real close with her, real buddy. It's kind of assumed he was making overtures to seduce her. As early as 1566, they were getting really, really close. And then in 67, the house blows up and Darnley's dead. Everybody points a finger and says, this guy did it. What? Just because I didn't like him and I wanted his wife? You guys are crazy.
I certainly wouldn't blow up his house and then murder him in the garden.
All the subtlety of an axe to the face. It's just,
what was his name?
Bothwell. James Hepburn.
I just want to cross-check the name. It was
James.
To make sure it was
It's
a James.
Another James, yeah. That's why I'm going with the last name, Bothwell, because there's a James. Her son's name is James. Her father's name is James. Her lover's name is James. Fortunately, her previous guy was Henry of Darnley. But we've literally only heard Henrys and Jameses so far. That's the only names we got.
She'll never say the wrong lover's name in bed.
She's just got to guess.
Oh, James. Normally you call me Jimmy.
How dare you?
I'm not sure why.
Why
None of
we
them are British.
now? Because he's nefarious, and nefarious villains are always
evil. James Hepburn.
Yes.
All right.
James Hepburn, Lord of Bothwell.
Allegedly killed.
Allegedly killed this guy. So they have a trial. Like, because the Scottish one's like, well, normally what we do is we just murder you because we don't like you. And
Right.
But we'll be civilized.
Sure.
We'll have a trial. And he's acquitted of charges.
Okay. Oh, that's nice. Good lawyer.
Great lawyer, apparently. He makes a whole spectacle of it. I'm not guilty. Has his retainers, the whole Hepburn group follows him. He has a big white horse to ride to court, and I'm awesome. Do, 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 do. And he's kind of a powerful guy.
Okay.
Seems
like a jerk, though.
He's a jerk, but he's able to raise like 800 men as an army, kind of a thing. He's not like. No. I can think of like 2 people I could raise. As an
I don't
army.
think I could get 800.
One of them's my cat. Like, it's not a great military. The other is me.
I think I could maybe get 50.
I mean, you're an alderman. Can't you rally? Like, isn't that like a thing you can rally the banners?
Yeah, it's a thing.
Like you can call like as the older person, I call the banners to fight against the White Walkers.
Yep, that's what we do.
That's what you do, right?
After we fix potholes in the street.
Fix potholes, rally the banners.
That's right.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool. Yeah. That's how we do in America. We rally the banners. All right, so Bothwell basically just walks in like a peacock. Like, I raised my nose at you people. I didn't do nothing. And they don't convict him. They acquit him. He's like, ha-ha. A very short time later, Mary's traveling to Edinburgh. And Bothwell stops her on the road with his 800 guys and says, "There's a conspiracy to kill you, milady. Follow me." And whether she went willingly or not, this is where things get a little dicey. So Bothwell takes Mary to his castle with his army. Mm-hmm. He either rapes her or willingly gets into bed with her. We're not really sure. 2 weeks later, or 2 days later, I should say, he's divorced his wife.
Oh.
And 2 weeks later, he marries Mary.
Oh, well, something happened.
It's like 2 weeks after he's acquitted. Yeah. They're married. After he maybe murdered her husband.
He's a real good lawyer.
He's got a real good lawyer. He's real convincing.
Or he must be really innocent.
Or she and he were working together and planning this whole thing from the get-go. So that's the confusion. There's not really anything is totally set in stone sure about this, whether she seduced him or he seduced her, or that was a mutual attraction and they're like, hey, the only thing in the way is my stupid husband, and I'm Catholic and you're Catholic, so we'll just bump him off.
You know, you set this guy up as such a jerk, I didn't even see that twist possibility coming.
There's no
way. They're working together?
They could be working together.
Interesting.
Well,
but maybe. All this we don't know for sure.
All of this we don't know for sure. There is a piece of evidence referred to as the cask letters. There was a silver cask, which is like a little box. The casket letters, not the cask letters. Sorry, casket. A casket does not mean where you put a corpse necessarily. It's just a small box that folds open. Usually longer than it is wide. That's a casket. I think that's the rule. I think that's just the rule. Is it has to be a longer than it is wide, and not. It's probably a certain fixed dimension, and as long as it's that ratio, you're good.
Okay.
But it was gilt in silver, and it had the seal of Francis II, who was the King of France.
Yes.
That was the one she was married to and died. Right. So actually, yeah, he did get a number after his name.
Got it.
For the 5 seconds he was king. You get a number. You get crowned, you get a number. I'd actually rather not be king because I don't want to just be a number. William the Conqueror, though, he wasn't the first. He's just the conqueror. That's way better. So this casket letters... I'm halfway there. Which is good because this is where I'm supposed to be.
Casket letters.
The casket letters. The Scottish lords get their hands on these in 1567, which is the trial time of... when Bothwell is on trial, when Mary marries Bothwell, and almost immediately after she marries Bothwell, all of Scotland is like, this is really bad, or whatever, she's the queen. The surprising switch is her half-brother, James Stuart, Earl of Moray, switches sides on this. He's like, that's messed up. You married the guy that probably blew up your husband. And
Yeah.
nobody likes this. Like, he's a bad dude. Like, he's a schemer. He's a troublemaker. He maybe kidnapped and raped her, or maybe they work together, or maybe he's using her as a puppet, or she's using him as a puppet. People aren't really sure.
Either way, James is not on board.
Either way, James is not on board with the other James. The James don't like each other. It's getting very confusing, right? So, cousin or brother James, Moray, does not like Bothwell at all. And he rallies the troops. And he's like, all brave, loyal Scots, this guy sucks.
Now,
We
where
need
are
to
they?
stop
They're at Bothwell's place, though, right?
Yep, Bothwell's
His
castle.
own
He
little
has,
castle.
it's like Dranwell Castle. I can't remember exactly what it is.
Okay.
So, Bothwell's like, but I married a queen, so I'm like the king, and this is awesome. And
I'm
she's-
basically the king.
Yep, and she's like, well, I'm the queen, and I do what I want. This is a weird thing, because actually the Catholics are really mad at Mary.
Oh.
The Catholics are the ones that are like the most angry with her, and she's the Catholic queen, because she married a guy who got divorced.
Oh.
They don't recognize the marriage as legal because they don't recognize divorce.
We're not upset about the maybe murder.
Well, I mean, there's that too, but they also just straight up don't recognize the marriage. Like, he just dumped his wife, which is not cool, and then 12 days later marries you. Now, what happens to the wife? He just kicks her to the curb.
Yeah.
Like, what a jerk. And then you expect us to treat him like he's the king of the country? No,
Nope.
that's
No,
not
sir.
that's not how this is. So Moray's got like all the support. I mean, Mary has like her staunch loyalists, but James Moray is able to go, yeah, this is not cool.
No.
Rallies the troops.
But you don't need support if you're queen, do you?
It turns out you do.
Apparently.
So what they wind up doing is they gather basically armies, right? Queen's like, I'm a queen. You have to listen to me. And Moray's like, yeah, but you suck.
I can move anywhere I want on the board.
Yep.
In any direction.
She does, and she moves any direction to what's called Carberry Hill. Now, Carberry Hill is not. It's the site of a potential battle. It's the battle that never was,
Okay.
because she's got her troops, and it's a few thousand men, and Moray shows up with his troops, and he's got a few thousand men, and they basically stand in a field and yell at each other. Before she can commit her troops to battle, it's like the army just starts to kind of go, well, I gotta go that way. I'm gonna leave.
Huh.
I got stuff to do. The other guys are all like, pub. Let's go to the pub. They desert.
Both
Like,
sides.
Pretty much both sides. Mostly hers. Her army just dissolves.
Okay.
They don't see this going well, and Moray's like a trained soldier, and he's got like pretty well trained and exercised army, and they are not backing down. So her army's just like, we're going to the pub. You want to come in? I left the crops and the pig, and I got farming and my wife,
Now,
and I gotta go.
how often does this happen in battles?
Where people just leave before the battle starts?
Yeah. I guess we wouldn't know. There's not much
Yeah,
of
there's a
battle
lot
there.
of battles that never were, where it's, it's basically like to try to prevent stuff, you say, we've both got swords, we're ready to use them, let's negotiate,
Yeah.
right? And that's how like lots of peace deals are done. Typically, the armies just go their separate ways when it's done, and then they disband, but to like watch one break apart, that usually doesn't happen unless the
Yeah.
other side is really, really scary, or you just don't believe the cause.
Yes.
So she starts losing support, most importantly of which is her husband.
Oh, that's bad.
So Bothwell basically gives her a hug,
Well,
kiss on the cheek, and leaves.
he is a jerk.
He is a jerk. He abandons her at the field. She's just like,
We're fighting
where are
'cause
you
of-
going? He's like, I'm going to get help. I'll be back.
Get a pack of cigarettes from the gas station.
I'm going to the gas station. I'll be back, honey. And he leaves. Now we'll tell the sordid tale of Bothwell. Because Bothwell's like, I'm going to go to Norway. I have friends, or not Norway, Denmark. I have friends in Denmark.
Sounds
and
nice.
I will talk to the king there, and he'll rally an army, and we're going to come back, and we're going to kick Moray in his stupid face.
Yeah.
And we're going to put Mary back on the throne because she gets captured after this and thrown in jail. Because they're like, yeah, you suck. You're a liability.
And you have no army now.
You have no army, and your husband is just the worst.
Yeah.
And we don't know what your plans are, so please
In
go
the
to jail.
clink.
When she's put into jail, she's forced to abdicate the throne, and Moray becomes regent to young baby James VI, her son, Mary's son.
Yeah.
And the Scots largely agree with this. It's a majority. It's not like everybody, but it's a large enough number where the lords are like, yeah, this is fine. But Mary's husband just leaves, and he's going to go to Denmark. Well, he has some bad luck, and his ship crashes in Norway.
Oh, no.
Where he's found by one Anna Thornburg, who is his jilted lover
What?
from before, that he stole her dowry and ditched her at the altar and went to Scotland.
Of all the beaches I had to crash on.
It's basically like he lands at her house. Like
Oh,
he's
no.
he's at this lighthouse, and people find out who he is because he doesn't have the right paperwork. He doesn't have anything to back up his story about who he is or what he's doing. He's like trying to cover his butt. He has no support here. He doesn't know anybody. He's on the wrong side of the ocean, like the sea. He's supposed to be in Denmark. He's in Norway. Like, oh crap! And she finds him, and she says, "Daddy, you're the admiral
Daddy?
in Denmark and a big shot in Norway. I want him to suffer." So they lock his butt up in Denmark for the rest of his life.
You never go to a country where your ex is.
No, it's like it was just it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy.
I guess,
though.
yeah.
Like I had to admit, because it's just like beautiful comeuppance. Like the girl that he screwed over first.
Yeah.
And just left and abandoned and shamed, and then also robbed because he took the dowry. He took a big
Sure.
chunk of money and then just left her.
And then she's just been sitting in Denmark waiting.
She finds him and she's like, she has a bit of a soft spot
Hello.
still. Like she doesn't have him like murdered. She doesn't have him executed.
Sure.
But he's locked in a castle till the end of his days in Denmark. Like he's like, oh well, I was going to try to go to Denmark where I'd get help. I am in a castle, but they're not helping me.
I guess you're helped. You're
He
saved.
apparently towards the end went insane.
Yeah,
Good
well,
for him.
Whoops.
But he lived until where? 1578. So he was married. He was married to her in May. Their battle, such as it was in June, 15 June. So from May to June, that's when he was with Mary, and then from then on, he's in prison and then dies.
Wow. When was the blow up thing? That was like that same.
And that blow up thing was in April.
Oh, so he had just a rough summer.
He had a real rough
Especially if his plan was to get with Mary in the first place. If that was his original intent.
The
But
second he got with her, it went bad.
None of that went well at all.
No,
Right.
real bad planning. Real bad
guess,
planning. Just
apparently.
the worst planning imaginable. So Mary's imprisoned in the castle.
Yep.
And it's Loch Leven Castle. Loch is Lake, Leven,
Yeah.
Leven, castle. Controlled by Moray, and they don't want her going anywhere. Well, she finds a sympathetic noble within the castle who busts her out, and she escapes in 1568, almost a year after she was imprisoned. Now, prison for a queen is pretty swanky. Like, you're still a queen, so they treat you with respect. You just can't go anywhere without guards. So she probably got to wander
Like house
on the ground.
arrest.
House arrest, yep. No ankle bracelet, but guards. Although
Yeah.
if you're really bad, then yeah, ankle bracelet, but it's shackles.
Sure.
But
I
she's,
imagine she had it pretty nice.
he probably had it pretty nice. But she's still like, she's got this, I am the queen. And by rights, I own Scotland. And you know what? I kind of might own England too. Because my
Come to think of it,
great-granddaddy was the king. And Elizabeth is stupid.
mm-hmm.
But for some reason, she decides she's going to flee to England once she's busted out of jail. She thinks, if I flee, I will go and hide with my idiot, sympathetic cousin. Because that seems to be what her thought is.
Yeah.
Because immediately after getting across the border, she's taken into protective custody. Meanwhile, Scotland breaks down in civil war. And you have to watch the James Stewart episode to find out what happens there. Spoiler, King James becomes king and stays king. Mary does not get her throne back. Moray does.
Is that a spoiler for this episode?
Spoiler for the
And that
James.
episode.
Yeah, double spoiler. James Stewart Moray is really good at what he does, and so good that's why, people want to assassinate him. But fortunately, after he passes, young James becomes king of Scotland. And
Yes.
that's important because that factors into our story in a little bit. So that's what's going on in Scotland. In England, though, Mary comes to Elizabeth with a sob story. I've been supplanted. My people hate me. Nobody likes me anymore. They're saying all this nonsense and it's unfair. So Elizabeth's like, well, I gotta figure out exactly what the truth of all this is.
Right.
We're going to have what's called a conference. And it's going to be a bunch of nobles. It's kind of similar to a trial, but it's like it's a commission, a committee. A bunch of nobles get together. They gather information. They try to get all the facts together and say, this is what happened here. This is what happened there.
And they're trying to get to the bottom of all the things?
All the things. So they're trying to figure out what the political situation is in Scotland,
Yep.
Mary's rights to Scotland, all this other stuff. It does not help that Mary refuses to participate. She is a queen. She doesn't have to tell her side of the story. You just have to listen to her.
Oh.
That's her view on it, which is very frustrating
That is hard
for the English because
Yeah.
they're like, can't help you
Yeah,
if you don't help us. Like, but she sees it as how dare you assume that I would not be in the right because I am the queen.
Yeah.
So there.
Okay, Your Majesty.
And they're like, fine, let's do this. So this
follow-up question.
This conference is convened. So in 16 of May, 1568. So it was the 2nd of May, 1568 is when she escaped the castle.
Okay.
She's kind of in the wind for a little bit.
Where do you think she was going then?
Well, originally,
House to house?
what happened was she gathered an army in less than 2 weeks. It's pretty impressive. She gathered this army together to kind of like, I am free now. I shall retain my throne.
I have an army.
So we have to back up a little bit because I forgot about this. This is a little detail. It's kind of important. So she's like, I'm going to gather an army and retake my land, and I'm English now instead of Scottish or French.
Prison has done wonders to me.
It's amazing. I've become English. And so she fights Moray. Moray's got a smaller army. She's the queen. She's divinely inspired, she thinks. And they meet at the Battle of Langside on the 13th of May. So it's 11 days after she is busted out of jail.
Man,
She's gathered this army.
She must have been planning that, though.
Somebody was.
Yeah.
She probably had ideas planned out, but more likely her supporters were gathering forces and just kind of keeping her out of. She's more of a figurehead at this point. And then she busts out and she's set in front of the army. I'm the boss of all of this, and you suck. She fights her half brother, James Moray. That's her half brother still. Remember, like he was her advisor for years and years. But once she married that Bothwell guy, he sucks.
Yeah, he was no good.
No good. Bad for the kingdom. Well, the battle that goes really badly against her. It's a one-sided ass-kicking.
No.
It is not good. Her army gets crushed, even though they outnumber Moray. But again, really experienced soldier.
Sure. Now, when you say she bleeds or she battles, she fights, she doesn't.
She's not like with a sword.
Yeah.
She's sitting on her horse going, look at the people dying
But is
for me.
she? But is she like even coordinating stuff, or we don't even know?
Probably
that?
not.
Oh, no.
She's not a
You
military.
know why? Because she's a woman. That's why.
Well, some of them did coordinate, but yeah, she's not a warrior.
I'm
But
sure
it
women
is
are
hard
just
to actually-
as capable of
women
planning a
definitely
battle.
were and are. It's just that she was not that type of
Right.
woman who learned. This is not like Boudica, the famous Celtic warrior queen. This is, well, I'm the boss. Kill them. Who's good at killing? You're good at killing? Okay, kill them.
I grew up in France.
I grew up in France. We don't have these problems in France.
What's a croissant?
Can I have an omelette? Bring me my wine. Where is Pierre? You don't have a Pierre. What's that even mean? So they have this battle, though, and it goes really badly against her. And it's the only full battle of the Scottish Civil War involving Mary's forces, her loyalists, and like this confederacy of nobles.
So of this Civil War, the only official one.
It's the only official full battle.
battle.
Everything else is skirmishes.
Yeah.
Moray's really good at just hammer, nail,
Yeah.
nail. Just pounds. He just goes like from noble to noble to noble, beating the crap out of them instead of letting them get together in a group. It's a really smart move.
Yeah.
It's very efficient, and it proves to be his
So what he
doing
did
as well.
That's or some Roman guy did that. Or was
Yeah, we talked
or
about?
Did we talk about? Or was that him that we talked about that did that?
Well, he did that. He also blew up somebody's house.
Yeah.
He was rude about that. But that's a very common tactic. It's the divide and conquer, or just hit them before they have a chance to.
Yeah, there's some Roman guy, I forget who.
Belisarius, maybe?
Maybe.
Belisarius was really good at that.
Yeah.
Taking little castles, going advanced. He's my hero. Anyway, so Moray crushes Mary's army. Mary flees. 2 weeks, or not even 2 weeks, like 2 days after this, she gets on a little fishing boat.
She does not.
It is a fishing boat. And
Somebody else. Someone's rowing.
I just like the image of this queen. I'm imagining like a poofy red dress and a little hat thing. And we're going to escape.
Adjusting her crown as she goes.
It's little from. She gets up and just.
What an escape.
Takes a queenly jaunt afterwards. And then the English nab her, basically.
Right.
Like, oh, you're the queen. Isn't there some stuff going on? Oh, well, let's just put you in a castle till we figure this out.
Sure.
That's when the sob story to Elizabeth happens. That's when the conference starts to go.
Okay. All right. Back to here.
That was my fault.
That's fine.
My notes, I had it out of order. I just got excited. I got excited because drama.
Yeah.
Family drama is the best. So they have this conference then in October of that year.
Okay.
It takes them a little bit to get the lords together.
But this is all 1 year, right?
This has all been just in 1567 to 68 now. Yeah, so 1567 is like when her husband blowed up.
Yeah.
He was murdered, but the house blew up. But I like to just say he blew up.
Yeah.
It's more fun that way.
Regardless, it's been a long year.
It's been a very long year. Yeah. Yeah.
I thought your year was rough.
This is yeah, so like the death was in, what was it, February of 67. So, yeah, in like a year and a half, from 67 to now May of 68, or October of 68, that's been her year. She's been imprisoned, now she's kind of imprisoned.
Yep.
She's been in battles.
Yeah.
She's had 2 husbands.
Yeah.
She's one of them
And
just
they're both
left.
gone.
One just ditched her. Go figure.
Boy.
So she's having a rough time. But through this whole thing, I am the queen and I am the boss and you people suck.
There's one thing I know.
And I expect that my cousin will help me reclaim my throne because she owes it to me. Because we're cousins. So there.
Okay.
It's kind of the vibe that people get from her.
Sure.
During all of this, though, she's like really hammering on Elizabeth to send an army north. And Elizabeth doesn't want anything to do with this. She's like,
This sounds really messy.
Like, my dad was awful
Yeah.
to Scotland with the whole rough wooing.
Yeah.
And it's literally what it's called. I think that's amazing.
Yeah,
It's a worse name for a series of wars, and it was a punitive expedition, and it's like,
do you think he named it? He named it himself?
I feel like he did.
Really?
I think that was a Henry.
It's just a wooing.
We're just wooing you. Why don't you like what we're doing?
Oh, it's a rough wooing.
Slap. Like, you like the wooing, or we'll burn your house to the ground.
We'll tell you how much you like it.
It's a real rapey vibe.
Yeah.
Like, that's just Henry VIII. Just a real rapey vibe. I think that's like England kind of fell off of being popular with the rest of Europe because of Henry. They're just like,
this guy.
you are gross, dude. You're murdering your wives, and we know it. Like,
Yeah.
maybe Spain should invade. That's all we're saying. Like, maybe we should hit you in the face with, a hammer and just, yeah.
So regardless, Elizabeth doesn't want.
But Elizabeth really doesn't. She does not
been
have
too
this-
messy.
It's been messy.
Too much
She doesn't
going
want.
on.
She has no expansionist desires.
Sure.
She just wants to protect England.
Also, really none of her business, frankly.
Not really. No.
Yeah.
No. It's her cousin's business. Like, she wants there to be peace in Scotland.
Sure.
But so that's why she has this whole conference. She's like, well, what's really the right side of this? Like, it's really messed up that you married the guy who probably murdered your husband, even though he got off.
It's a little weird.
That's a little weird. But Scottish problems are Scottish problems. We're not an intervention thing. It's very, as Americans, this is weird, right? Like, here's a chance to intervene in a country. Let's go bomb it. And they're like, nah, that's not our bag.
Yeah, here's a little pro tip for countries in general. You can just say no.
You can not invade other countries when it's not your business.
You can just say no.
Even if it's a border country, you can just go.
I'm busy. Sounds like your problem.
And it's not like it's this genocidal horror show.
No, it's just a problem that sounds like a problem that Mary is partially responsible for.
Mary's definitely holds part of the blame.
Yeah.
Well, things are starting to calm down now.
Okay.
The Scottish Civil War doesn't outlast Moray by very long, because once James is crowned king and able to be in his adulthood, people are like, he's the king.
It's nice. It's nice to have a king.
Some people are still loyalists to Mary, but it's kind of seen as like this lost cause.
Right.
She's in England.
It's too far away.
Under Elizabeth's control.
Yeah.
So this conference comes through, they're having this conference, and guess what comes back to haunt Mary? The casket letters.
Dun-dun-dun. You forgot about the casket letters, did you?
These letters are not good.
Where do these come from?
They were found in her castle.
But who wrote that? Are these letters?
So
she wrote?
what these are they're letters to her and from her, between her and Bothwell and some other people. Basically saying, I don't know all the content of the letters.
But what about her emails?
But exactly. But instead of it just being like, well, there was a bunch of emails and it was like interpersonal stuff, it's not a big deal. It was like, this was kind of suggestive, like, I would love for you to come in and kill my husband so we can be together and rule Scotland together. It kind of paints her as like a harlot, just like this really schemy, bad person.
Do these letters still exist?
They do.
Okay.
So here's the thing.
So we can cold case this.
We can cold case this. What's interesting about this, what people have said is there are people that they're very divided historically. These are either very true, and if so, 1,000% damning of Mary and her actions.
Yeah.
She is 100% complicit in everything that happened. She was not raped or anything by Bothwell. She chose to be with Bothwell.
It was a plan.
It was a plan.
They wrote it down.
To basically, she didn't want to be with her husband anymore, so she offed him.
The most obvious plan, written down.
Right. Right. I mean, it's not kill my husband. It's a little more.
Sure. As anyone who's planned a murder of their spouse knows.
Right.
You want to do it subtly.
Basically, Elizabeth's advisors who are reading this are like, okay, so I'm just going to tell you this. Here's the letters. They make copies of it and say, if this is all real, she's a really bad person. Like, really schemy. They refer to certain parts of it as being ballads, so it's probably poems written back and forth, things like that. It's highly romantic and all this jazz, which is why Mary is given this super romantic figure throughout history of like the lovelorn queen and just wanting to find love in the world and just having some bad luck with guys. Oh, my husband blew up.
What rhymes with blow up my husband's house? And then I'll be your spouse. That rhymes.
Lift up your lovely blouse.
Yeah.
Aha!
Perfect.
And it's like romance novel kind of stuff. So the lords that are talking to Mary or Elizabeth about this, like, so she's either awful or these are super elaborate forgeries, which is what Mary says. Mary says that's a lie.
Anyone can
my
write.
handwriting is super easy to copy. That's her defense. That's her defense. So her defenders throughout history have said, nowadays, especially now since people have examined the letters more, they've looked at these things. Unfortunately, the originals are gone. They're burned. Sometime theoretically in like 1584 is the guess, is when they were destroyed. So Mary says these aren't mine. The studies of them have been like they're either really, really elaborate forgeries or possibly they're all legitimate letters, but pieces have been put into them. That would be more condemning and damning of what Mary says and does. So Elizabeth through this conference just says,
But we can't. But those letters are gone. We can't check the.
We can't check the originals. We can check all the copies that were made of them by hand, which is pretty impressive because like they even got the handwriting down. It's nice. Yeah. Mary is immediately like Elizabeth just goes, what we found between the letters, between everything that's going on
doesn't look good.
You're not going back to England. Well, Mary starts scheming to take the English throne then.
Well, I'm here.
And she's basically been talking about this, and Elizabeth has this spy master. Literally his title. His name is Walsingham.
Walsingham, the spy master?
Walsingham, the spy master. Now, if you look at a picture of this dude, he looks like a spy master. He's got like a cool goatee.
You can find this picture online?
I can find his picture.
No.
Do it after.
Put it right here. Remember, it's right here.
Walsingham.
Ooh.
That's Walsingham. So he just looks like a spy master, and he's good at his job. Because there have been plots to kill Elizabeth since she was little. Now he's like, I gotta watch Mary. She's trouble. Because Mary is very put out that she can't go back to Scotland. She has all of these ideas where she's going to reach out to her son and they're going to make peace. And she begins this big overture of peace with her son. And he's like, yeah, no, I do not trust you.
Yeah.
I was raised better.
Your plans don't seem to pan out real well.
Just like you've been kind of schemy and troublemaking.
Yeah.
For 18 years, Mary is bounced from castle to castle to castle in England. Because Elizabeth's like, well, I can't kill her. She's my cousin.
Yep.
Even though she's scheming.
You can't send her back to Scotland.
There are several plots that come about during her time in prison where Mary's talking about killing Elizabeth. Potentially. There's the Ridolfi plot in 1571. That's the first big one. The plan is they're going to kidnap and kill Elizabeth. It's called the Ridolfi plot because there was this Florentine banker who was going to get money and troops from Spain, and they were going to invade, and it was going to be this whole thing, and then they get caught, and the Duke of Norfolk gets... He's an English guy who's going to help out. She has his head cut off. Elizabeth does. She executes him. Treason. But the big one after that is the Babington plot that happens in 1587. And this is the big one.
Okay.
There's this guy, Anthony Babington, and he's a recusant. Or a recusant. We've talked about this in a previous episode. These were the same guys who got behind the gunpowder treason.
Okay.
The idea behind it is they're Catholics who refuse to take part in Anglican services, so they just recuse themselves from going to services.
Recuse me.
He gets in touch with a guy named John Ballard, who's a Jesuit priest. Jesuits. Elizabeth does not like Jesuits. They work with the Spanish kingdom to try to undermine her. These guys have this scheme where it's kind of the same thing of, we're going to get an army to come in, take you away, or take Mary away and free her. But Walsingham catches wind of this. Now, Walsingham is the guy who kind of outed the Ridolfi plot, which got the ambassador from Spain kicked out of England for forever. They closed the embassy. No more Spanish anymore. Walsingham, since then, builds up this spy network. He starts having double agents and triple agents. Ooh. He knows they're out to kill his queen, and he's not having it. He is fanatically loyal to her. But it's impressive because he doesn't make death squads or a secret police force. You see this a lot where it's just they're overzealous and they kill a lot of people. He lets the little fish swim.
Okay.
And then give him information. And then he starts inserting his people in and having them have spy. And they basically just out themselves. He gives them all enough rope to hang themselves. So this Babington plot comes to his attention. And it's a legitimate threat. These guys have a plan. And then he gets this guy to get in there. His name is Philippe. And he says... And it's one of his dudes. Philippe is one of his guys. And Philippe's part of the planning now. And he's like, let's do this. I just need to know who all the guys are so I can talk to them. And they give him names.
Oh, no.
So now he has all the names.
Philippe does?
Philippe has all the names. But then there's one key component. Mary's part of this correspondence.
Oh. She can't be trusted with letters.
She can't be trusted at all. So everything's in code. It's a very interesting, there's he's got this code.
It's a legitimate
doing
spy
this. It
plot.
is a spy plot. The letters are not the letters are all moved around within the letters themselves. The alphabet's off. Some spellings are weird. They have codes. It's very intricate. And the last letter that Mary writes says, "Let the plot commence." That's all she says.
Mm-hmm.
Signed, Queen Mary.
In case you didn't know.
The second Walsingham gets that letter, they arrest everybody. They tell Elizabeth what happened. She's heartbroken. She knew her cousin, but it's this is I have to do something now.
Yeah.
My cousin's been plotting against my throne.
Here it is written down.
For 18 years, and that's her right there saying, kill my cousin, give me her throne, then we'll conquer Scotland, and we're going to do this whole thing. We're out of time, but I'm going to fit. I'm almost.
We got to wrap it up. We didn't get to the point.
Because now we're at this. This is what happens. They gather together all 14 guys that are involved, and in 2 separate sessions have them executed. Now, they don't decapitate them. They give them the full treason treatment. Treason is punishable by hanging, drawing, and quartering.
Oh.
You hang someone until they're half dead. So they're not dead. They're just out of it. They've been choked. Then you rip their entrails out. That's drawing.
Yeah.
Bit by bit with a hook. You cut them open, you yank it all out so everybody can see it. And then you chop their head off and quarter the body. It's incredibly gruesome.
Yeah, and time consuming.
And it takes a while. And if you're the first guy, that's awful. But the second guy is watching.
Yeah.
So by the time you get to the 7th guy, this has been going on for maybe hours.
Yeah.
And the psychological effect is horrifying.
Oh, imagine.
They kill this last guy. The first 7 are done one day. And the outcry against this is like, this is really harsh. Like, we know they committed treason. They're going to kill you. Can we not? And Elizabeth says, okay, fine. Here's what we'll do. You hang them until they're mostly dead.
Okay.
And then draw and quarter them.
Oh.
None of this half dead stuff.
Come on, guys.
Mostly dead. So it's they might well be just dead and out of it, and then they cut them up. But she's like, but justice, we have to show that justice will be done the proper way.
Okay.
Like, it's a combination of her choice, her lord's choice. It's
Sure.
like, they were going to kill... It's probably a big part of it is Walsingham going, they were going to kill you, and I put in a lot of work, and we're killing these guys right.
Okay. We do it right, but we'll do it nicer right.
Then they get to marry. So the next 7... They kill 7 more guys that way. They get to marry, and they're like, she's a queen. We can't do her like that. And she's a lady, and you don't hang and draw and quarter a lady.
Yeah.
Elizabeth has to sign her death warrant because she's committed treason.
Yeah.
This is not a thing you do. And she's got this legacy of, my daddy used to kill queens when he didn't like them.
You like it?
I really don't want to do this.
Don't make me be like my dad.
Exactly. It's like, this is what... She kept her alive for 18 years in different castles to try to not... There's a story that Elizabeth asked the last guy who, like, was in charge of her care if Mary could maybe have her life shortened unexpectedly.
Accidents happening.
Rather than execute
Sure.
her. She knows she's plotting. She knows she's scheming. She knows she's doing all this bad stuff. She doesn't really have the heart to kill her. She doesn't want to kill her. So she's like, could you just poison her? She's out at sea and her ship sinks. She falls down the stairs. And the guy just says, I can't do that. I get it. I get why you want to do that, but my conscience couldn't handle it. Rather than punish the guy, she's like, okay, fine. And then this plot happens.
Yep. So she has to sign the death warrant.
She has to sign the death warrant, and on the 8th of February, 1587, Mary's led out in front of 300 people. She was given a trial at which she was not allowed to have a lawyer, was not allowed to review evidence, and was not allowed to dispute the facts. It was basically like, you suck.
Yeah.
It's kind of a sham trial, but at the same time, they have all these letters. They have her witnesses. They have her secretaries. They have the people that were loyal to her, and they all go, she's bad.
Yeah.
And in her own hand, let the plot commence. And that's her death sentence right there. 300 people watch as she's led out, put down on her knees, and the executioner for the royal household cuts her head off. And that's the end of Mary. Now, the immediate consequence of this is she was ruling Scotland, right? She was still like a threat to the rule. Well, not anymore. Elizabeth also has no children. Her closest relative is her cousin-ish, James of Scotland. When Elizabeth dies, she gives her throne to James of Scotland.
Okay.
So James of Scotland is the James VI of Scotland, but also James I of England. That's her closest kin. And because of his loyalty to Elizabeth and his faithfulness and the way he led his people, Elizabeth's won over by this. Because, like, all of this scheming and plotting, Mary's constantly trying to get her son roped in, and he never bites. And because of that, the immediate consequence is he's Elizabeth's heir as well.
Oh, there you go.
And then he becomes, like, the first unified Scottish-born king of both England and Scotland.
Huh.
And it's a pretty wild time. And it wouldn't have happened that way if Mary hadn't been scheming and plotting and doing all this other stuff. It might have gone very, very differently.
Well, good job, Mary Queen of Scots.
Wow. She's the Queen of Spots.
Queen of Spots.
She had the measles.
All right, well, that was lovely, and sorry to hear it turned out so badly for you, Mary.
I can only have so much sympathy.
Maybe make better choices.
Yep. Well, not anymore. You can't.
All right.
Make enough bad choices. That's
We're
what happens. Consequences.
Way over
Out
time.
of time.
So I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions or comments, please comment below, and we will comment back.
Oh yeah, and this whole episode was because our good friend Erica brought up that she'd like to know or talk about more about the death of Mary.
Thank you, Erica.
Erica especially, read us the riot act if we did wrong.
Yeah, tell us more stuff.
Tell us more stuff.
And then tune in next week. Next week we will be doing the trial of Galileo from 1633. In which, before that time, I guess the sun was in a different position in the sky. We'll talk about all that next week.
Yeah, what happened then?
For right now, it's This Week in History with Mike and Will. I'm Mike.
I'm Will.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys.